So, um, who's your grandfather?
So, my grandfather is Vernon Winslow, also known as Dr. Daddio.
And who was Dr. Daddy-O?
So, the character Dr. Daddio was a DJ on the radio. He actually was the first black DJ in Louisiana, which was an accidental thing. I mean, he worked at a radio station, but he was behind the scenes. He was not allowed to speak on air. He basically coached the white disc jockeys in how to be hip, how to speak jive, what was the cool music to play, what was going to get you listened to. And one day the station had dead air after the DJ left the booth, and my grandfather wouldn't let the dead air stand, so he actually got on the radio and introduced the next song. And of course, that was during segregation in the late 40s. So they ended up firing him immediately, and he went on to work for Jax Radio and become the first hired black DJ on air in New Orleans radio. I was probably not alive when he left Jax, but from the stories that I have heard from him, from my mother, from his former coworkers, was that my grandfather basically had played music. He enjoyed music. He enjoyed working at Jack's, but as he got older, some of the sponsors, and of course, Jack's was a brewery that happened to have a radio station. He did not like what it was doing to the black community. People were drinking, and he really was a family man. And over time, it took a toll on him, and he didn't quite like what he was seeing in that part of our culture. So he went to WYLD and ended up playing gospel music in his later years. And I think that reconciled and brought peace. The sponsors were different for gospel music. The music had a different message. He felt that it was the responsible way to bring music, enjoyment, and entertainment to people's lives. He always had a melody that he was humming, or, you know, the la di dee 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 dee. And I can't say as a child that I necessarily recognized the song that was in his head, but it definitely wasn't an extremely up-tempo tone. So I'm assuming he was listening to gospel and jazz in his head. Vernon Winslow, my grandfather, was born in Detroit. And as a young child, he and his quite many siblings moved to Chicago. And he basically grew up in Chicago. He finished his undergraduate degree in fine arts in Chicago. He then moved further south. And I know that when he was here in New Orleans, he got a master's degree in fine arts from Tulane University, and went on to teach art at Dillard University of New Orleans. He was primarily a painter. He drew. He did some sculpting, but he basically was an all-around artist. He worked for Dillard University. At the same time, he was a DJ. He was also writing articles for periodicals in New Orleans, mostly Black periodicals in the time. So I always knew my grandfather to be kind of the jack of all art trades, and definitely taught me many of the different arts in my early upbringing. One fond memory that I have, my grandfather was always known as my babysitter. So between my grandmother and my grandfather, I spent a lot of time with them in time off of school. And as my babysitter, one thing that I remember was he would take me to Jazz Fest with him. And I kind of grew up at, Jazz Fest in the gospel tent with my grandfather. He used to sit me either in the front row or plop me on the edge of the stage or backstage. So I always thought it was quite normal to see, Fats Domino or Irma Thomas or many other artists just kind of come through the area, talking to my grandfather. I thought everybody's grandfather brought them to Jazz Fest and worked at Jazz Fest and, knew all the artists that were in New Orleans and outside of New Orleans in rock and roll and gospel and jazz. That was just part of my grandfather being my grandfather, being that family man. He toted me around everywhere. I always even remember when I would ride around in his orange Carmen Ghia, and his records were right there, either on the floor, or he would be getting them out of the trunk, and where his leather bag was right next to me. There were always albums around, albums in his notebooks about his shows. So that kind of became memories of my grandfather and what we did. Even going down to radio stations. I remember going to WYLD a couple of times thinking, oh, this is the other place you work. That and Dillard, all the time in the art studios.
So we can kind of close it out.
Basically that even the whole, community knew his voice, his students knew his style. They knew how much he was trying to give to them and make sure they were successful. I've met some of his students as a teenager, and as an adult. I met one of his students recently, and he was just able to tell me how much not only my grandfather, but feeling cared for, feeling like he was part of the family with my grandmother, my grandfather, my uncle, my mom. It was like that was a family away from home. And even when it came down to his coworkers at the radio stations, people that I've met, he did advertising locally. He wrote, and everybody I met just had like the warm and fuzzy feelings. And honestly, my grandfather was all of those things to all of those people. But at the same time, he was, for some odd way, he found the time for his family. He made sure he would have dinner after my grandmother, Iris Winslow, passed away. He made sure he had dinner with my mom and I all the time. He made sure that he made time for holidays with us. And, he meant so much to so many different people in so many aspects. It's just, I don't know how he made time for everybody. There was never a person he didn't make time for.